Welcome to Moments with Marianne. Allow me to interrupt your train of thought with something that may be one of the most interesting things you hear today. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Kori Hahn, who's here to share with us her new book, Rituals of the Soul, using the 8 ancient principles of yoga to create a modern and meaningful life. So Kori is the founder of a community gathering place called the Santosha Society, which is dedicated to travel, surfing, and soulfulness. She hosts numerous trips around the world for hundreds of women who study Ayurveda, yoga, meditation, and all things related to soul growth, knowledge, and fulfillment. So let's welcome to the show, Kori Hahn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I'm going to ask you, what inspired you to write this?
That's a good question. I didn't actually have this exact book in mind. I knew I just wanted to write more about intuition, and over 5 years, it's really evolved. And I feel, in a way, that I've channeled what we have left here today with this book. And I just wanted to write more. And I think that was really my soul telling me to explore myself through this creative process. But what we have left in the end result is actually something I'm so proud of, because I think it's beyond me. It really came from a place within and from source, really. Because every time I would come back through and edit it again and again, which you do many times, I would think to myself, where did this come from? So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, and I'm not even sure exactly myself where it came from or where the inspiration came from, but I'm glad to have it here finally ready to read.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed reading it. And if you said your book had a purpose, what would that purpose be?
I feel to help people learn to use yoga as a way to live their life, as a way to see the 8 steps and integrate them in through little daily rituals, and not to have a spiritual science that takes over your life, but really just enhances it and rides along with you to where you want to go. And so that's what I would think the purpose is, and to get to know yoga and to use it in your own life to help you in your own personal ways.
Well, you talk about the 8 ancient principles of yoga. So, was this something that over the course of just your personal development, your soulful development, that you have done the research and come to these things? Is it something that you felt that when you were talking about channeling, was it something that you channeled?
I do feel that way. I've studied yoga for 20 years, but and I mentioned this a little bit in the book, I feel like I was only practicing the physical form of yoga, asana, that most of us see, especially in the West, on the yoga mat, and then also meditation. So I learned Vipassana and different types of meditations, but I never really understood anything beyond that. And I had this feeling that intuition was really important, but I couldn't quite figure out how or why. And so to go in and realize these other principles, I felt like it moved me beyond kind of where I was stuck in the spiritual science to really understand the principles behind what I was doing, even on the yoga mat, even with my exercise, to have a intention behind my practice. And those came to me also as I reread the old scripts, actually, like Patanjali's old Yoga Sutras and other even more modern commentaries on it. I came to find the meaning of the 8 principles through the process of writing this book.
Oh, that's just fascinating. I love how that all comes together. And it's interesting because you do talk about something that you don't hear often. So when you hear about yoga or meditation practice, most of the time people do not even put in intuitive anywhere near that. So I was so excited to hear that you are also bringing this portion in because it seems like part of the practice.
It's the entire practice, I believe. And even as I went back on the last few edits of the book, I found one sutra in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and it says, all the powers of yoga can be gained through intuition. So really the entire process is guiding us to that, to listen to ourselves, to find the soul within, to find our God within, and to really realize that about ourselves. So yeah, I think that might be the missing link for all of us, actually, myself included. It was quite eye-opening to for the book to take this turn in the creative process, but I'm glad it did because it answered a lot of questions that were just hanging open.
Well, you did what a lot of people either wish they could do and don't have the courage to, to kind of carve out the time in their schedule, or just don't do, and spend, about 6 months in the wilderness. Do you feel that that time really helped for you to hone in on just how you're feeling about yourself and intuition as a whole?
Yes, it's funny you talk about that because I'm actually back in Alaska now, and it's been fun to come back here and revisit. I actually was up here for 12 years, coming and going. And some of those, I did spend large chunks of time really isolated in the wilderness. But I most definitely came to learn myself and learn what my passions are. I learned to entertain myself, so to look in and see what I would love to do today because there's no schedule and nothing to do, and even to simplify what I could love, what my passions are. So if it was shopping, I really didn't have that. It had to be something alone without many resources. And I believe that was the beginning for me of yoga. Was even though I was practicing yoga, it wasn't so much what was happening on the mat, but really listening to me and learning to find my passions. And that came from the wilderness. It was the space to listen. And so many of us just stay in our distractions, stay in our busy lives. And I feel like that was what kickstarted me to live such an unorthodox life in a way, and to be able to really listen and know what it is I wanted and to go after that. I would give the wilderness and that space and time all the credit for these things that came from that moment, if that
Well,
makes sense.
it makes perfect sense. I've
Yeah.
done kind of like a similar thing when I first moved to Colorado. I spent, like 5 months up in the Rockies. There's no cell service, and there's got to be something to be said about that. It's, why some people would be like, "Ooh, you don't have cell service." It's actually kind of relaxing,
It's amazing to pull us away from our distractions. It's so funny, isn't it? Our greatest distraction these days is that cell phone. For me, even I've come back into the wilderness. My friends offered me this big, beautiful house. And my biggest concern is that I wouldn't have cell phone service, just like you just said, because, well, for a good reason, because we were supposed to be here and having these talks today. But I was so wrapped around that. I needed that so much. And I realized that even if I went and lived off the grid, I could still come back and have cell phone service and do the things I needed to do. But it's a really hard thing. It feels uncomfortable sometimes to detach that much, to not be reachable. But that is really a key ingredient to listen to relaxing, like you said. Yes, it feels so good once you get past that discomfort.
Yeah, I mean, and then you can actually, it took a few weeks for me, but after that, I was really grateful, so,
Yes, me
and
too.
yeah, and that's what I really appreciate about your story, because you allowed yourself the time to dive into your spiritual practice in a way that I even envy. I'm just like, wow, I wish I could do that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it just kind of happened. It all laid itself out. They say the universe gives you exactly what you need, and a lot of that time alone to do that, to write this book, there was so much frustration in it, and it looks like a peaceful, beautiful process sitting in the middle of nature. It must have been so great, everyone says, but it was painful because that's really learning to let go. That's learning to grieve, and I think we all can make that time and do that, but it goes against the grain in a way. So that's why we don't take that time, because we're like you just said, oh, well, but I'm gonna have to get rid of my cell phone. And that means I can't look at my Instagram and whatever else it is that we're so used to doing and distracting. And but it is a powerful way to grow up, and spiritually, I believe. Monks have been doing it for for a long time. So that was always kind of my my inspiration to make sure that I take that time to check out and to check in essentially as well.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting when you're by yourself in situations like that, you got to get along with you, you know? So, and a lot of
That's
times,
the challenge.
yeah,
Yes.
that's where I think a lot of us get hung up, you know?
Hmm. Yes. And I talk about that actually at the very end of the book, that I think you really have to find a way to love yourself to be able to do that, to be able to even to stop the distractions, to get out of that cycle. You might find that you're doing that because you don't want to face your pain. You don't want to face these things you don't like. So it has to, yeah, you have to find love along the way for yourself, to allow yourself that time, to allow yourself to do that. And which I'm still figuring out. Even this trip back with my son, I can see that more clearly than when I was younger, in the place of where I was writing in the book, talking about my spacious time in the wilderness. This time I'm really seeing that if you don't honor yourself as a soul and give yourself that time to nurture that and respect that about yourself, you're never going to take this time. You're going to stay in distraction so you don't have to face that truth.
Isn't that the truth? You know? Been there, done that. Well,
Yeah.
and I love how you talk about it's about loving yourself. How long did it take you to get to a place where you found that as the key?
That's a good question. I'm still figuring that out, I believe. And it's a hard thing to learn to love yourself and to accept your pain in a loving way, like Ram Dass says, as loving awareness, and all the struggles, and see that as the journey, and all the perfection, to see that as our humanness. That's our lifelong journey. I honestly believe that if we truly see ourselves as worthy and as a sacred soul, and we learn to just compassionately look at our lives, there's a good chance we probably won't keep reincarnating. I honestly believe that's the main purpose of our life here, is to love ourselves for the soul, and to live our life from that. But it's not easy because it's such a subconscious process, to be honest. And a lot of our disdain and our self-loathing and our self-criticism and not going after what we want is really hidden beneath the surface. So even if you say, I want to love myself and I'm going to do all these self-care practices, you almost can't force it. You have to still sit and find the space and time to let those subconscious things bubble to the surface so you can create the space for that love to exist within you.
Yeah, that is a rough practice. It's, but I found that your book really helped inspired me to look at that in a new way, because it's really easy to get caught up in what society says that we should look like and be like and dress like and feel like and all of that. And if we get stuck in that, it's really hard to get to a place where we can actually honor ourselves. And I felt your book really talked about how people can kind of move into that practice.
I'm so glad to hear that. That makes me really happy. And I hope so. That's been my journey. So I think if others are struggling with the same thing, then hopefully the book does help with that. But that makes me so happy that you felt that way.
Thank you. I know in your book you talk about creating space. So, why would we do that? And how important is that?
Yes, that's actually the first tangible concept or principle, as we call it in the book, that I believe that the yogis really wanted us to understand, is to separate ourselves from everything that's happening and just to observe it. I feel like without space, we can't even really see what's happening. And I can use that in my relationship. I have a son, and he's 5 now, but with his father, we're now separated. We were in these pain cycles, and we would stay in that pain cycle until we decided both to create a lot of space, which we did right before the pandemic. So I'm just going to use this as an example. Once we could separate for that year, we started to see the ways that we were talking to each other. We could call each other out on it without reacting, and so really you are changing your subconscious patterns by creating that space. You're changing the habitual distractions, even like the phone that we talked about. Like if anyone's gone to do a Vipassana meditation retreat for, they take your phone away, and it's in that time that you don't have the distractions and that you're sitting there, that you really learn to observe, to listen, to feel what your intuition wants for you. And it's such a necessary, it's the first step, really, I believe, for anything else to build upon. And that's where everybody must start, and not just once, but every day. We can look and say, how can I create space? Or how is this making me feel? And if it's not good, that's the first thing you can do with that aspect of your life, or with that person, or with your job, or anything, even with the project. Sometimes I even had to create space from the book to say, this is stressing me out. I'm never going to find a publisher. I've had so many rejections. Create space on it. And then I could take a different angle. I could see the opportunities in a different way. And it's just such a huge element that we always think we have to keep trying in our Western minds, to keep making effort. There's got to be something else I can do to make this work. But really, less and simplicity might actually be what you're waiting for to finally get the ball moving, ironically.
Well, it sounds like everything was in flow for you, because you're actually with one of my favorite publishers, New World Library, and they have some tremendous books that they publish. And so when I was looking at this, I was like, oh my gosh. And, and to kind of piggyback on what you're just saying, you have this, this, I'm going to say, quote in your book that I've highlighted because it really stuck with me. It says, sometimes we have to stop being habitually busy in order to learn to be a habitually calm and spacious. And I'm like, ooh, I could do that.
Yes. And that's exactly what we're talking about, is we have to. And even reading books, I think with New World Library's books, their books are really a breath of fresh air. A lot of their books are mind, body, and soul. And of course, they have a million different topics. So I don't want to put every book in the same subject, but I've taken actually a little sabbatical from writing in order to just read. I was so scared while writing my book that I would take inspiration and just, sometimes you forget where it came from, or it's inside your body and then you put it back on paper. So I didn't want to confuse that in my book. But I did find that most of the things I've been reading since, and a lot of New World Library books, they all talk about this space. They all talk about simplifying, minimizing, getting out of that habitual busyness that it's just so ingrained in our Western minds and way of being. And even society wants us to function that way. There's an encouragement to be more, to make more money, that this is what success looks like. So yearn for that. And especially even in the spiritual world, like keep becoming. You're going to become enlightened. And at some point, it's just like, if you ever want to be relaxed or calm, you have to make that happen now, right? Like make that moment happen. Make more of those moments happen. And I love that. I'm finding that as well. And through my own journey, and just how to take space. It's one of our greatest lessons.
What are some ways that people can create spaciousness rituals in their lives?
I think one way I've guided my clients and my students to do this is by sitting and taking a meditation, even 5 minutes of breathing to calm the nervous system a little bit down, because that helps to tap into your intuition a little bit more. And then to look at ways that you feel you're wasting energy, or it's just too much. What's happening? What would you just love to not do anymore? Even if it seems like a necessity. But every time you have to do that, you just, you feel the drain. You feel the energy go out. And that could be dishes. It could be cleaning the house. It could be, if you're an entrepreneur or you run your own radio show, maybe it's all your graphics, all your social media. But find things in each and every day that you do that feels not spacious, that feels tight. And you can even start looking at your physical body. I believe that's what postures, that's what asana actually means in yoga, is to look at your physical body and find, where does your heart start beating faster? When do your hips start feeling tight? When do you feel uncomfortable? And start asking yourself, how are ways that I can minimize these tasks these things that I do to create more space in those areas specifically. So the areas that feel kind of busy, cluttered, distracted, not what you love to do, and integrate them there in rituals. And that ritual might be hiring someone else out. It might be taking 5 minutes as you wait for your coffee to brew. They could be little steps, but what you're doing is every single day you're making a moment to create space. You're making a moment to feel that you've simplified your life, to feel calm. And I found that was a really powerful way to use yoga because I have been a militaristic yogi for most of my life, practicing Ashtanga, a very intense 1.5 hour style of yoga that was actually created for young boys. And I found that I was overwhelmed with my to-do list all the time, especially my yoga practice. I believed I needed to do an hour and a half of yoga every morning, an hour of this movement, and then at least 30 minutes of meditation. And when I started practicing, realizing why I was doing it, I could create rituals that were small and simple. And now I've been running around the world pretty much, as Sri Lanka is on more and more lockdowns, and it became difficult for us there to stay home anymore. We came over here to the States, just my son and I, and I've never felt so calm and grounded, even though I'm solo parenting, taking calls, publishing. I mean, if you looked at what I'm doing, it looks incredible right now. But because I've had these rituals every day, I remind myself whatever it is that I need to stay calm like that. And so I don't want to help anyone to create their specific rituals, but to see how you can practice like that, I feel is a real life-changing moment for all of us. And you're not only a dedicated yogi or spiritual practitioner when you do 1 hour, it's more when you understand what you're doing and understand how it works and start integrating it. And that might be 10 minutes a morning. It really can look so much simpler and easier than I think we want to let it.
Oh yeah. A lot of times when people think about, getting into a mindfulness practice or being in the present moment, it's something that seems a little daunting. And I really appreciate you have a chapter on becoming mindful because it kind of breaks it down so it's not so big and scary.
Yes, I hope so. And it has been big and scary actually for me. I remember I just talked about Vipassana, my first Vipassana retreat. I remember the last day I had done all this work. I really learned how to meditate. And I remember just crying, and everyone else seemed so happy. But I said the same thing. I said, you've just shown me a way to heal. It's going to take lifetimes. And I was so overwhelmed by that. Even though I had learned the tool, what I realized is how long it was actually going to take to work. And that's because I saw it as that to-do list. I saw it as 1 hour every day for 365 days a year for maybe 20 more years, whatever it was, rather than I can stop and be mindful 50 times a day. And you know what happens after I've done that for a few weeks? I just am naturally more mindful all the time. And it did become less daunting. It actually started to take place. And I was doing less. My to-do list became shorter. And so, yeah, I feel like sometimes realizing it, to put it into action in small baby steps takes a lot of that overwhelm away. And I hope that helps someone else the way it has helped me, because like I said, I was crying. My first meditation retreat, everyone was thinking, what went wrong here? But it was that same realization that this is really, really hard work and the process is long. So we don't have to worry about that. Let's just put it back in the present moment and see what we can do now here. Even these 5 minutes when you feel you're feeling busy, your heart's feeling fast, to take that, you can take that mindfulness and put it in right here in this moment. And that's all you really need to know. Suddenly the peace comes back and the calm comes back in, and you might have averted a huge anxiety attack or nervous breakdown by doing that. So the results are happening and you're seeing that change right here, right now. And that's bigger to focus on than this dream of enlightenment, clearly.
Well, and I think that's important because I can remember when I first started, my mindfulness practice, I was constantly going, okay, no thoughts, don't think. Okay, wait, I'm thinking. Oh, shoot. Anyway, and then what time is it? And then it's like, oh, do I have to start over? So it's easy to kind of get stuck in all that. And I really appreciate how you kind of it was a very gentle way that you spoke about that in your book and brought that all together.
God, I'm glad. It was my first, I talk about that a little bit in the book, but my first retreat, I had created stories about every person in there, even though it was silent. I was looking at the clock literally like every 5 minutes, to the point that the teacher noticed and took the clock out of the room. Like, I mean, and this is someone who's now writing a book on mindfulness. So I think it's just safe to say that, like, we can, no matter where you are, you can make changes to that. And it doesn't have to be as hard or as arduous as a journey as we think it. But yes, I get it. I started also really struggling to just make it happen. And now and I also now don't have the time with my son. I mean, of course I can sit and make a practice happen if I really want to, but it's hard. I found it much easier to just like make little moments happen. And yeah, and so glad that we can integrate mindfulness into our lives nonetheless, even if the journey was hard. And I'm glad that you felt that way, that I made a little more within reach, I hope.
Definitely, because you can grab those moments driving in a car on the way to
Yes.
work, or, because everyone has they have their lives, and they're usually overbooked, too busy, too much going on, even during this time. It's
Mhm.
back-to-back Zoom meetings, you have it. So being able to kind of identify different times when you can really be in that space, I thought was really precious.
Thank you. Yeah. And it has been a game changer for me as well, honestly, to do the dishes and to just take 10 breaths right there, right then is, it's not your quintessential yoga pose. And even you don't ever have to sit in that quintessential yoga pose, but that's why I guess a lot of the inspiration too behind this book was to realize that there's such an unorthodox way to do everything, but especially that mindfulness practice.
Well, I know in your book you talk about developing awareness. And I think a lot of times that kind of gets thrown around. So I would love for you to kind of share with our listeners what that is.
Yeah, I believe that awareness is really taking that pause, that spaciousness that we talked about, teaching. And I'm a little bit explaining the steps we take in the book, but at first I guide the readers to create spaciousness, to just take a pause, to create a moment so we can just, um, to make time for our practice. Essentially, you're making space in your body, and your schedule in the beginning. Then we learn to create space in the mind with the mindfulness practices. And when you do that, when you teach the mind to concentrate, which is every single school of meditation, that's the first thing they teach you to do, is just how to concentrate. Because if you can't concentrate, how are we going to teach you anything, right? I mean, that's what the meditation schools are thinking. How are we going to move into any other ideas or concepts? So that's what they do. They teach you just to concentrate. And when you learn to focus the mind, you are able to observe and be aware of your feelings, of what's happening, of how other people are treating you. You might suddenly wake up and say, wow, I've actually been in a toxic relationship my whole life, or I've been in a toxic relationship with myself. You might become aware of the way you self-loathe and the way you talk to yourself. There's so much observation that can come in that, after those first two steps start to take place in your life. And I believe that that's really the key to becoming intuitive. That's how you learn to be aware of this voice that does live within you, the whispers of your soul, your intuition, and how they are guiding you to take action, whether to take a turn to the left or a turn to the right, or to spend more time writing versus whatever you're doing. That's where we really start to to move into where the soul is guiding the human life from that awareness step. That's the key right there to understanding intuition, your own intuition. Yeah.
Well, you said so much there I'd love to unpack, and I wish we had more time. The one thing you mentioned about is that toxic relationship with ourselves. I mean, my goodness. I think a lot of times people think of toxic relationships as something outside of themselves, but that could very well be within us.
Yeah. And it has to be, because if you're in a toxic relationship with someone else, it's only validifying the toxic relationship you have with yourself, really, I believe. I'm not a therapist in any ways, just a yoga teacher, but that's been my experience. Yeah, exactly. If you were going to allow others to treat you that way, we really do define how others see us, how they treat us, what we accept in our lives. And we only decide that by how we're treating ourselves. So it's a good first place to start, and they even say many modern day psychiatrists or psychotherapists even talk about that. When you want to fix your own marriage, go fix yourself. Take that time for yourself. Look within. How do you do the work on yourself? And for a while, it didn't make any sense, but now I see that we're all just walking projections, really, aren't we? So all the drama and everything that's happening in your life, and even all the ways you can't find space or your mind is busy, these are also just ways we want to gain awareness for what's happening within that's creating without. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, what a good note to end on. My goodness, Kori,
Wonderful.
I really loved your book, Rituals of the Soul.
Thank you so much.
Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Yes, thank you for asking. I'm quite active on Instagram. That's my main social platform these days. And I have courses and different writing and blogs through Santosha Society, which is my community. And that's you can find that on the website, which is www.santosha, SANTOSHA, Society, SOCIETY. And I also have a podcast, which is the Soul Sessions, and it's all connected through the Instagram and the webpage. And then also my book, which I hope a lot of new spiritual seekers can find me through this piece of art and this expression that I'm so proud to be putting out there, and so happy to have come to all these realizations through the book. But I do hope that anyone that reads or enjoys and wants more support in this process to find me and to join along, because this is what I'm passionate about, and I believe that many of us need this after this COVID experience. So that's where I am, and I'm loving it. I'm loving the community right now. So come and join.
Well, Kori, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for having me.
Well, thank you, Kori. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Rituals of the Soul. Rituals of the Soul is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.